Segue, to continue at once with the next musical selection or composition.
Segue, to make a transition directly from one section or theme to another.
Segue, to move smoothly and unhesitatingly from one state, situation, condition, or element to another.
Segue, to perform in the manner of the preceding section.
Segue, to make a transition from one thing to another smoothly and without interruption.
This is Segue with Dean Aldemaro Romero, a weekly program exploring the lives and work of the people of the College of Arts and Sciences at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville.
Hello, everybody. Miss Wendy Greenwood was born in St. Louis, Missouri. She obtained her bachelor's in theater performance at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville, and since then, she has been acting and directing for several theater performances. Welcome to Segue, Miss Greenwood.
Thank you.
So the first obvious question is, how come did you get into theater? What motivated you to get into that profession?
My mother. It wasn't so much the profession at the time. I was in first grade, and there was a school play, and I was terrified, and I wanted nothing to do with it. But she told my teacher that I would be a part of it, and I kind of got pushed into playing a little rabbit, and it kind of sunk in. I had a really good time. And then in high school, it just kind of progressed, and it just kind of spun off from there, and I found that I loved it, and I couldn't get away from it as much as I, had interest in other areas. I loved it. It kind of sunk in.
Okay. Now, a lot of people who see theater from the outside think of most people involved in theaters as amateurs. Mm-hmm. But the reality is quite different.
Yes.
Tell us about how was for you the transition between what you thought was theater to the moment where you really understood what theater was all about.
It is kind of a culture shock because when you are in college, it's educational theater and you're learning about the profession of acting or about being a technician or director. And then you graduate and you go out into the real world and you audition and you don't get cast, and you audition and you don't get cast, or you do get cast and then you end up working and networking with professionals. And that's when you really get to use what you learned in college to build a career. Mm-hmm. In college you learn what it's going to be like or the idea of it, and then you're kind of thrust into actually having to fend for yourself and network and build on these skills and use these skills and really market yourself because no one else is going to.
Okay. Now, the other thing is you rather recently transitioned from being a student into being a professional. Mm-hmm. What would you say to those in our audience who either are parents or kids or the kids themselves who may be thinking about theater? What would be your recommendation of theater as a career?
My recommendation is to realize that theater is more than acting. There are thousands of professions, including the one that I do. I'm a theater teacher. I teach for the Parkway School District, and that's a career in theater. But I think a lot of times parents get really scared thinking that their children are going to come here to learn how to be an actor and they're going to fail. But there's so many, many different careers. And I think that students and families need to realize that it's not just acting. There are designers and technicians and carpenters and electricians and mathematicians and scientists and artists and writers and musicians. Yeah. So there are many thousands of careers. Yeah. So I think that people need to realize what their actual interest in the realm of theater is and then go from there.
Okay. Now, you mentioned that you have been teaching. Mm-hmm. Is that something that you would like to continue doing for the rest of your career?
I think from a very young age, I always knew that I wanted to teach theater. I direct professionally, I act professionally, I stage manage, I do props designing as well. But I always knew that I wanted to teach. And I do see myself doing that in some capacity, for the rest of my life. Even if it kind of segues into acting coaching, or if I continue teaching or become a coordinator in my district or whatnot. But I do see myself in education, for the rest of my life.
Okay.
I love it.
Now, would you say that the teaching of theater among the teaching of the other arts is in danger in this country because of budgetary cuts?
I think in certain states and in certain areas and certain districts, it is. But I think in those areas, perhaps the theater educators need to learn how to be their own advocates. And because it's pretty much a well-established fact that arts education only betters and enriches core education. There's tests and studies and factoids out there, but it does. It improves and enriches core education. So I think that it is in danger. But I also think that theater educators need to know how to advocate for themselves and show that arts only enriches core curriculum.
Okay. Now, you have been both directing and acting. And since you mentioned earlier that it's just more than acting, I was wondering what of those two things you really like the most, directing or acting, and why?
I think if I had to pick just one, if I was forced to say I would only do one for the rest of my life, it would be acting. And I say that because every time I direct, I love it and I learn so much, and I really do. I find such joy in directing, but I find myself missing being on stage or wanting to model and show the actors how to do this or how I would do it. So I think that kind of points me in the direction of being a performer myself. But I think that from the experiences that I have with professional directors, they all have experience in the other categories. They've worked as technicians, or they've worked as performers, or they work with performers. And so I think from myself personally, I would say acting is my number one passion when it comes to theater. But I'm not going to pick just one if I don't have to.
Okay. Now, do you think it's important for a director to have had an experience also as an actor or even in other specializations within the theater universe?
I do, mainly because theater is such a collaborative art. And in order to collaborate well, you have to be able to empathize with people in the other areas of theater. So even if you haven't been a professional actor, even if it was only an educational theater, I think it is important for a director to understand what it's like to be an actor, or understand the pressure that a technician is under or the designer is under, so that you can collaborate and make your production the best you possibly can. Because as a director, ultimately your goal is to make your vision and your understanding of the show come to life. And to do that, you have to trust the actors and the designers and the technicians. And if you can understand where they've been, that it helps tremendously.
Of all the performances in which you have been an actor, which one has been your favorite? The one you have the best memories of?
This is a very hard question, but the one that I have the best memory of was a production that I did in college at SIUE, and it was a production called Summer and Smoke by Tennessee Williams. And I think professionally, out in the professional world of theater, I would not have been cast in this part, but I wanted it. I loved the play. I fought for it. I auditioned really hard, and one of the professors here, Chuck Harper, cast me. And he was new that year. This was his first year here. And he cast me because he thought I was right for the part. And it was so challenging. It was such a hard show. The show was about 2 hours and 40 minutes. It had 14 scenes in the first act, and my character was on stage for 13 out of the 14 scenes in the first act. I got to leave stage twice, pretty much, and I was going nonstop, and it was really dramatic and really hard, and I'd be really tired at the end. But it felt very fulfilling, and I loved it. It was so challenging, but I loved it.
Now, many people think that maybe for a long play like that, the challenge is the memorization of the lines. But actually, it's much more than that, right?
Well, it's sustaining that memorization. You can memorize anything. Anyone can. But it's putting the thoughts together and that through line. It's, as an actor, your job is to fulfill the director's vision. And so I had my own ideas about the character, as I do with any play that I'm in. But my job, because acting is a job, is to fulfill the director's wants and desires. So you have to find a way to match the two. You have to make how you see the character match the vision of the director and carry all of that throughout the entire show. And with a long show, it is very challenging because you get tired. I would get tired of talking.
Physically, yeah.
Physically, I would be tired. That was one of the only shows where afterwards we didn't go out together as a cast because we were all tired.
Well, it's funny because for all of us who are in the teaching business, we know that every time that we give a class, and obviously if we really care about what we're doing, it is a physically demanding activity. I mean, I remember when I used to teach, I getting home at night saying, I'm exhausted.
My first week of teaching, it was 2010, this is my first week. I was a professional teacher. I lost my voice because I didn't realize how much I would be speaking. I teach 6 classes a day, 6th grade, 7th grade, and 8th grade, and I didn't realize how much I would be talking and reteaching. And that first week, I lost my voice because I was talking so much. It was physically exhausting in a very fulfilling way, but I was tired. Yeah.
Okay. Now, I'm sure as a teacher and also as a person who has been in theater, you have seen or read many plays that you had not participated in. And I was wondering, of all those plays, is there one that you would like to be either an actor or the director of?
Yes. There's 2, one for each. As a director, I would love to have the opportunity to direct a play by Sam Shepard, and it's called Curse of the Starving Class. He writes plays kind of about middle America and just about gritty human struggles, and it's not these big grandiose ideas, it's just about people, and the play is funny and gut-wrenching and odd, and it makes sense. I don't know, I read it and it really hit me, and I would love to direct this play. And then as an actor, there's a play by David Mamet. It's called Sexual Perversity in Chicago, and it's just this ridiculous comedy, and it starts off with these 2 characters just talking back and forth, just bam, 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 and it's so funny, but it's how people talk in real life. And the 2 female characters are the same way, and then they all 4, kind of injected themselves into each other's lives, and I love that play, just the wordsmithing of it.
Okay. How about any of the classics? I mean, the Shakespearean.
I have always, always, always wanted to play Titania in A Midsummer Night's Dream, and I've never been able to.
Okay.
I will get an opportunity coming up very shortly here in September to play Phoebe in As You Like It for Shakespeare Festival St. Louis. They do Shakespeare in the Streets. And just today I got cast in that before I came here. Thank you. But also, I mean, of course, the classics, I can't wait until I'm old enough to play so many roles. Like, I would love to play Gertrude in Hamlet, but I need to be older. And so actually a lot of people are scared to age. I can't wait.
Okay.
I want to play these parts eventually. So yeah, I kind of need to age myself into a lot of roles.
Okay. Now, you recently directed The Little Shop of Horrors. And I wonder, to what extent is there a challenge to put on a stage a play that is so well known by people, especially because of the movie that originated the whole thing? What kind of challenges do you think you face when you know, well, most of the audience have seen the movie?
The challenges that I face with that, and like last year I directed The Sound of Music, which was the same thing. That was a famous play and famous movie. And but with Little Shop, it was a movie first. Everything was based on the film. That's where the musical came from. So everyone's idea about Little Shop of Horrors is that movie. And so you have to kind of pay homage to that. But the script does that in itself, except the ending. The ending's different. In the film, it ended more happy, on a happier note, because the original ending didn't test well with audiences. So in the play, they give you the gritty, sad, everyone dies ending. So I tried to kind of warn people of that. But I wanted to, like I said, pay homage to the film, but also work with the script and work with the talent that walks through the door. Because you might have an idea in your head of what you want a certain character to look like. You know, oh, well, Rick Moranis played this part, so I think that's what I'm looking for. And then someone comes in and just blows your mind with talent. They sing it excellently and acting is superb, and you have no choice. You just have to give the parts to the people who are the best for the job, and I think that's what I did. And like with Tyler Green, he's a student here, and he has to live up to that Steve Martin dentist, and those are hard shoes to fill. Yeah. But we played on his strengths and his comedy and his look and what made him funny. And so I think you have to draw the line between the film and the musical.
Now, you also directed the Sound of Music. Mm-hmm. I was wondering, do you have a special preference towards musicals?
Actually, I don't. Actually, in my professional life, I do not do musicals. Really, I've been on one musical as a professional actor outside of SIUE. I'm a singer. I dance. Mm-hmm. I'm an actor, but I personally, that's where I feel the least secure in my footing. But directing musicals, I don't know, I kind of see it as a big piece of music and you make everything fit together. I love directing musicals because you add choreography and music on top of something that's already complicated. Mm. But actually, I don't pick the shows that I direct. I'm just asked to direct them, so.
Okay. Now, as an audience,
mm-hmm.
do you prefer to attend a musical or a plain theater?
Plain theater.
Why?
I personally connect more with plain theater. That's where my strengths are. I just connect more with plays. I feel like they talk to me. And I feel like I'm in the minority of that category. My mother, when are you going to do another musical? Go do a musical. I can't wait to do musicals. She loves them. A lot of my friends are in musicals nonstop, constantly. And I love musical theater. For me, my choice is straight theater.
Okay. So let me give you two other choices.
Mm-hmm.
Classical or modern theater?
I think, as an audience member or as an actor?
As an audience.
As an audience member, I would say modern.
Why?
As an audience member, modern plays are easier to understand. Classical acting is hard. I prefer doing classical acting. I love it. But that's not true of all other actors. It doesn't come easily. It's hard because you didn't live during those time periods. You didn't speak like that. You didn't dress like that. And the movements are different. And it kind of puts up a barrier sometimes. And it can be difficult to adapt to what you're watching. Sometimes you feel that disconnect. So as an audience member, I think I prefer to see modern plays, so long as the writing is good.
So you feel that if you're going to participate in a performance of a classical theater, you need to study more to really understand what was the intent of the author?
I do. You do, because you don't have a direct connection to that material. You might get the emotional undercurrent. You might understand the emotions behind it, but a lot of people look at Shakespearean text, written in verse with iambic pentameter, and they have no idea what is on the page. But if you translate it to a modern text, they're, oh, he loves her and he's so sad. So I do think if you're going to be a classical performer, if only to benefit yourself, to understand what you're saying, you should do the research and understand the vocal patterns and what is written and how to perform it so that an audience understands you. Because as an actor, again, another part of your job is to will yourself to be understood. If the audience doesn't understand it, then you've kind of waved your arms about and talked for 2 hours and they don't get it.
How about experimental theater? And I'm asking the question because if someone in our audience hasn't seen experimental theater, it is a theater in general, requires a lot of physicality. Mm-hmm. I mean, the actors have to be almost athletes to do certain things that are required in the play. So how do you feel about experimental theater?
I think it depends on whether the director and the playwright and the actors are doing it to express themselves or an idea in a way that they just couldn't express some other way, in some inventive and creative, beautiful way. I had to get this across to you, and there was no other way for me to do it but this. Sometimes, in that kind of experimental theater where you can see the joy in it, and the actors are just loving what they're doing, and they're doing these big things that you don't understand, but at the end you think it's beautiful. That I really enjoy. But a lot of times, actors, young actors, even professional actors and directors and whatnot, perform experimental theater to anger an audience or to evoke an extreme emotion, theater of the absurd, where they're supposed to horrify and, anger the audience or try to upset them. I'm not a huge fan of that.
And another dimension of experimental theater is that many of the plays are actually designed to involve the audience. And that may be a challenge by itself, because not all audiences respond the same way to the same things.
Not everyone wants to be touched or invited up on stage or has an actor sit on their lap or throw water on them. That's very true. And I think you have to, as an artist performing experimental theater, you need to make that clear to the audience, that we're not going to tell you exactly how, but you are very likely to be approached or touched or whatnot. I think it's when directors or actors try to get a rise out of an audience and they don't tell them and they shock them, that's when problems happen. But if an audience goes into it knowing fully well, you are going to participate.
That's part of the show.
Yeah, it's part of the show. Then it's kind of an understanding, like, oh, okay, I get to get up. There's a production right now that Stages is doing of Always Patsy Cline. And it's, the life story of Patsy Cline. But there is audience involvement, and not in a shocking, experimental way, just in a very funny, go out and, grab someone from the audience. But it's kind of known that will happen. And so the audience members are always very delighted to be pulled up on stage. But I think it's when you torment or go for the shock and awe factor that audiences tend to get upset.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you also have worked as a prop designer. Help our audience understand, what does a prop designer do?
Okay. Props designer, there's different sorts of props. There's stage props, which could be like furniture or paintings on the wall, set decorative items, anything that you see on the walls that an actor manipulates or touches. And then there's hand props, anything that an actor carries in their hands, pens, pencils, hairbrush, coffee mug, things like that. And then there are actor manipulated props, might be like in The Little Shop of Horrors, the body parts that he dragged in and fed to the plant, or the gun, or a potted plant like that. So the props designer's job is to read the script, find out what will actually be needed, talk to the director, and then either buy, find, or build all of the props that an audience sees. And they have to be durable because actors aren't gentle. We're not gentle with props. So you have to know what you're doing, know what's needed, and build them to last.
The other thing is, most people probably don't realize that, is props usually don't get rid of after the performance. They go to repository, because they tend to be reused, recycled many times. And actually, that's a big problem for many theater companies, is a space to keep those kind of things. So sometimes a prop you see in one play may have been used for a totally different play in the past.
Well, and it's the same with furniture.
Yeah.
Furniture is large. You can't store furniture at just any old place. And so a lot of times you'll go to one show from one theater company in St. Louis, and you'll see this set of furniture. And then 3 months later, you'll go to a completely different company. You're like, I recognize that couch. And so companies in St. Louis, they do. They borrow from each other. They rent to each other. They help each other out. Because we can't store everything.
Of course. Now, of all the prop designs that you have put together, which one was the most challenging, and why?
The most challenging show that I had to do props for was a show called Last of the Red Hot Mamas. It was for a professional production in St. Louis for the New Jewish Theater. And it was a great show, but it was set in the vaudeville era. And so they had to have steamer trunks that rolled, and suitcases, and blackboards, and circus props, and food, and anything that you can think of that goes with the vaudevillian actors. And there was tons of props, and I had to build a lot of it. There was one time there was a circus act, and they needed 8 different boards for the different acts that came up. And I had to create these vaudevillian standalone boards, and then I had to create a New York City skyline back from, the vaudeville era. So that was a hard show. Period pieces often are, because you can't just go to Walmart and buy that.
And it also means that you have to do a lot of research.
Oh, absolutely.
Which may be as time-consuming as doing the props themselves.
If you do it right, it is.
Okay. So let me ask you a question. Have you ever considered writing for theater?
I have, yes, I do.
Okay. And what kind of play would you like to write? What kind of story you would like to tell?
I think that it depends on the age that I'm working with. Here for SIUE with Cougar Theater Company, I had an idea for a production that I had wanted to do, and I got permission from Michelle Silverstein's lawyers to use 27 of the poems from Where the Sidewalk Ends. And so I got permission, and I put all these poems together, and I wrote these little interludes between them that made the poetry into a story. And we performed it here at SIUE. And then I wrote another play called A Beautiful Lie, and it's kind of a dark comedy. It's got 4 characters and just kind of ups and downs of life. But I think the plays that I write are kind of the plays that I like to see or that I would like to be involved in. They're just stories of people, whether it's real or imagined, but that they kind of have that emotional through line that everyone can kind of understand. There's nothing over the top or outrageous about it, I guess, at most points. But just, I think a story that I can connect with. If I can read something and connect it to my own life, if I can bring it home, then it's generally something I connect with, and I would write that.
Yeah, so writers say, well, the easiest thing
Write what you
to
know.
write is kind of autobiographical in many ways.
It's true. Write what you know. Yeah.
Okay. Well, in the 1 minute or so that we have left, what is your next big project?
My next project. Right now, I'm actually in rehearsal for a show at Mustard Seed Theater Company at Fontbonne. It's called The Human Terrain, and it's an original production, and I'm playing an Iraqi woman, and so I'm learning Arabic, and it's a horrible challenge. But it's beautiful. It's a beautiful, beautiful script. And then right after that, I'm doing Shakespeare Festival St. Louis in the Streets, and then immediately after that, the next day, I'm doing Antigone at Upstream Theater Company in St. Louis.
Okay. Well, I want to thank Wendy Greenwood for this appearance here in Segway at this interesting interview about the transition from being a student of theater to a professional theater person, the many facets of theater, and certainly the many experiences that you have had. So thank you very much. And next week, we're going to have Mr. Grant Andre, who is the Director of Arts and Issues at the College of Arts and Sciences, who will be talking about the next season of Arts and Issues. So stay tuned.
This has been Segway with Dean Aldemaro Romero, a production of the Department of Mass Communications at Southern Illinois University, Edwardsville. All rights reserved, 2014.